It's the 6th day of September 2022. Hope everybody's doing good on this Tuesday, except for the nuclear industry, of course. There's your atoms for humanity. The A-10 only shoots dirty bombs, depleted uranium munitions. And the pilots know that, by the way. And we get off with a banger whisper. Guess one place the International Atomic Energy Agency doesn't go to. It's India. India's kicked them out from day one.
According to Atomic Energy Act 1962, anything connected or related to nuclear power and nuclear energy in this country is total secret. Even Indian Parliament cannot ask questions. If it asks any question, government has, under the Act, power to refuse that information.
India's 1962 Atomic Energy Act forbids the disclosure of any information on any aspect of the country's nuclear energy program. It prohibits photography, sketching, pictures, drawings, maps. The penalty, up to 5 years in jail. For 40 years, India's nuclear program has grown up behind a carefully maintained wall of secrecy. Debate is stifled, opponents harassed. Only official information is available. Even owning a Geiger counter is forbidden.
According to Atomic Energy Act 1960.
So India's understood that they can't have a debate about nuclear. Just after Fukushima, it came out that they had arrested 10,000 people. In 2019, these people still haven't been to court. They were arrested for protesting a nuclear power plant. They were beaten up, and they can't get a bank account, they can't go to school, they can't get a job, they can't leave their communities. For over 10 years, it's still not resolved. They were charged with sedition. Their crime was participating in a peaceful protest against establishing a nuclear power plant in India and around their community. You can't even draw a picture of the power plant, let alone take a picture. This is what we mean when we say there is no checks and balances. And even the Indian Parliament doesn't have the authority to interfere in the nuclear industry. It's just a non-regulatory committee known as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, right? So it's a really the extreme almost. It's not really, because this is true everywhere, nuclear worldwide. The Western countries have a bit more liberty in talking about it, but you can see the censorship up on me, and I'm from Canada. We're supposed to be the freest country, right? We are probably the worst country by definition. After Fukushima's multiple nuclear meltdowns and loss of fuel pools, Canada lifted all restrictions on food from all of Japan. After 93 days, 55 countries banned it for over a decade in 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. Not just Fukushima. What the hell was that? Okay, I just really forgot. I forgot. Let's not go there. So, India is unbelievable repressive. Now, these communities, say a community of 400 people, 50 of them are hideously disfigured after being born after the nuclear power plant was put there. These are extraordinary numbers we're talking about, by the way, per population. Far more radioactivity. This type of Fukushima for about a minute and a half or so. We're going to jump right into the 24-hour news cycle. They're kooky today for sure. Far more radioactivity inside of spent fuel ponds, which is the holding containments is water, where they put the reactor cores when they take them out. They take out about 1/3 of the reactor core every 18 months. It goes in a pond because it's hot. The reason it's hot is it's still splitting atoms. So it's still splitting the same amount of atoms that it needed to split to power 1 million homes. But there's no containment, and that is vented all day into the environment. Each day there's another. Now, you can put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. But each one of them can give you an illness in increments over time to sequester in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. But how many does it take? If you can't see, that can't boil a glass of water, for instance. So think about how many it takes to boil a glass of water, but then think about how many atoms has to be created, because this is a perpetual machine. It creates clones of these isotopes at a perpetual rate, and an awful lot of these live forever, long past the human experience or the species, because they'll be exterminated by it. So you have this invisible snowstorm hemorrhaging out of over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. The numbers out of just a single pool are astronomical. There's more isotopes releasing from each fuel pool in a 24-hour cycle than there is stars in the universe, and every grain on your beaches combined are released from these fuel pools each day. So when you hear nuclear waste, that's what it really means, but they don't tell you. You won't hear it only right here, unfortunately. So each reactor holds, the time of the spent fuel pools, each reactor fuel pools, there's actually 2 of them. One of them is supposed to be for transferring, getting ready within a few years to put it in a so-called dry cask that is vented for decades, by the way, because this stuff is still splitting the atoms. And so it's a lot, right? Each assembly can hold up to 100 fuel rods, and Japan was notorious for packing the fuel rods because these reactors were supplying Tokyo, where there's metropolitan Tokyo, would have been 36 million people. So these things were jacked all the time. So each assembly could have weighed, and probably did, 1,800 pounds. 3,450, but there's actually 2 pools. And because you don't have a repository, both pools were stuffed. Just the implications of the amount of radiation released from a single facility 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for decades is terrifying for every species on the planet. But when you got 440 reactors, each of them would have at least 2 fuel pools doing the same thing. You wonder where all the species are gone. You wonder why there's climate change, aka global warming, global heating. Well, if you look at the statistics, there was an acceleration after Fukushima melted down, because that was the tipping point of 80 years of releases into the environment. Each reactor top of the pool, during the time of a single pool, could hold 3,450 assemblies. The common spent fuel pool, which was at ground level, the tsunami ran right through it, so that was lost, was 6,291 fuel assemblies, which means you're looking at over 600,000 fuel rods. It's actually a lot more than that, but that's a frightening, unimaginable number. And in comparisons to Chernobyl actually looks irrelevant compared to these numbers. And Chernobyl was brutal, of course. The fuel pools would be in those red depictions at the top. That's a simulation of the reactor buildings. The reactor core is at the very top, and so are the fuel pools. And reactor 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 all had that exact same design, the boiling water reactor. And so the fuel pools are gone, so is the reactor core. This is a stunning amount. They scraped off the top with the cranes and remote control cranes. And instead of a 190-foot building, you have a stump. It's the same thing with reactor 4. Now, many of the media has done this. Here's just one example. So the entire media had to participate in the deception. It can't be just so-called journalists, right?
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi Nuclear Power Plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
So she's not on top of that building. Now, I know I don't have to explain it to people, but nobody's ever challenged her. We're the only people that ever challenged her. Should Japan let independent experts visit the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns after 11 years of secrecy? And that might seem like a strange question, but these are not independent. They're pretending they're at the building and that the fuel pool is intact. It's not intact. You can see to the picture alongside of it. It's simply not intact. And you can also see that the building to the left is not intact, the fuel pools. And so that's what I mean when I say, should Japan let independent experts visit the Fukushima nuclear meltdown after 11 years of secrecy? Now, I'm not talking about Arnie Gunnarsson or Helen Kellercott or Chris Busby or Beyond Nuclear or Greenpeace or any of these despicable human trash that have betrayed us for over 11 years straight. They have pumped those entities, these are public relation firms, out to deceive the population, and they're extremely effective, apparently. Everybody's pretending that the world is normal. Radioactive waste in grocery stores at Tokyo at 2,700 becquerels a kilogram in tea. And Chiba's 20 kilometers from... The food in Chiba's been banned by 55 countries for over a decade. But not Tokyo. 5 times the legal limit, 1,500 becquerels in another community by Tokyo. Tokyo shuts down its incinerators because it's burning so much radioactive material. IAEA is mandated to accelerate. They're not, again, right, they shouldn't exist. They're not supposed to exist. United Nations, which is IAEA and World Health Organization and UNICEF and you name it, they have infiltrated every facet of everybody's lives worldwide and are actually running the planet. We don't have leaders that run our countries. We have United Nations telling puppets what to do and how to think and how to act, and by proxy us. There are 195 militaries, and humanity is supposed to stop that. That's not supposed to exist. It's a complete betrayal. We can't have a future with United Nations at the helm, and they are at the helm. Like expecting a tobacco company to prevent lung cancer. You can't call the guard dog a checks and balances. If you do, you're in denial. Disposing of contaminated soil would surpass the capacity of all disposal sites in Japan. and this was just 2011. I'll explain what I mean by that. By 2017, they admitted that they had 30 million one-ton bags. That's enough bags that if you took a one-ton bag, 2,000-pound bag, and put it in the back of a one-ton pickup truck, bumper to bumper, is 5 rows of traffic around the planet. Bumper to bumper. But some have put the numbers at 60 million.
There's about 60 million tons of contaminated soil that's being stored, planned to be stored, outside the Fukushima Daiichi perimeter fence. So
they're actually cutting the bags open in Futaba, which is 2 kilometers away from the ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns, and dumping the soil and growing food in it. And where they're doing it is a no-go zone. Wherever they dump it, by the way, is a no-go zone. And they're growing food in it for sale. Yeah, the first couple of loads are a test. But let's be clear, it's for sale. Try making that up on your own. So previous cesium limits in rice was because they had 56 reactors. There was releases, right? So they had 0.1 becquerel a kilogram. The limit now is 100 becquerels a kilogram, but they're not actually checking. Because if they did, they would have found quite a bit. They haven't found any, they claim, in I think 2015. They were claiming there was nothing exceeding their version of safe. Vegetables from inside Fukushima no-go zone now okay to ship to stores. These are criminals on a whole different scale. These are assassins feeding your loved ones radioactive food at your supermarkets. No sign of life, and all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. It ain't good, believe me. They've been assaulting you for almost 80 years straight. Don't worry, the Hulk and Spider-Man will fix it, Dana. No sign of life in Fukushima exclusion zone, only a few birds. Very few insects, just 2 birds. BBC, one of the most contaminated places on Earth. Silence is deafening 10 miles from Fukushima. The impaired and elderly Fukushima evacuees in need of food and water being charged rent to live in a box. And the vending machines sing, "Don't give up on Fukushima." The people that were trying to escape were put in boxes and kept there to keep the statistics so nuclear doesn't get too big of a black eye. The guy in charge of the victims, the top Japanese officials, said, "Let the elderly people hurry up and die." Taro Aso, the finance minister, that the elderly should be allowed to hurry up and die to relieve pressure on the state to pay for their medical care. They paid into it their whole life. That's what happens to you when you get older. You need medical care to enjoy your twilight years. To rob people of that is sickening. It's sickening that somebody can even conceive it. But somebody in a position of authority to do it with the stroke of a pen. Japan Deputy Prime Minister talks about learning from the Nazis. Previously said to let the elderly people, so he got promoted, previously said to let the elderly people hurry up and die. This is the same guy again. Fukushima official groups demanding measures to protect people from radiation are lefty shits. I can't help but only feel pity for their lack of intelligence. He's the public official charged with helping the victims of the nuclear disaster. And he done that on Twitter. So we got to rescue Japan from themselves. It's true that about 70% of Japan is polluted. by radioactive fallout. Tokyo is contaminated with highly toxic radiation. It's 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. Experts worry about catastrophic impact on the health. There's no longer any such thing as clean and safe food after radiation from Fukushima spread around the planet. People who advance nuclear power should be made to eat the extremely contaminated items. Indeed. Let's get started right away. I'll spoon feed them if you need somebody. Nowhere is safe. 3,000 becquerels a kilogram already eaten by hundreds of children under 12 years of age. It was actually over 800 volunteers were fed poisonous radioactive mushrooms. Mushrooms are one of the worst foods that you can eat. They're supposed to be one of the best foods you can eat, by the way. But because it aggregates radiation from surrounding, it's heartbreaking. Mushrooms are considered one of the few aliens on the planet. It was actually an incredible amount of evidence suggests it was brought here by meteorites, is the spores of the mushrooms, that they're prolific throughout the universe. Already eaten by hundreds of children under 12. 300, almost 300. Was it 200? Wait, no. 260 children younger than 12. 1, 2, 3. We got 5 more of these to get through. Radioactive xenon-133 in Washington was 450 times above detection levels after Fukushima. Persisted for weeks. This is a catastrophic plume that you can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or feel it. But I think this is a xenon model right here. Yes, it's xenon 133 model. What's the date on that? That's April 6th, 7th, April 7th. Now, we have other models. This is xenon model 2, 133. The top left-hand corner was 20 days. France's model is on cesium, if I remember correctly. This model from French government was based on 16 days of radioactive fallout. And so this is why you don't have to clean so many insects off your vehicle anymore. They disappeared in increments over the last 11 years. Very high concentrations of hot particles in the Pacific Northwest, including plutonium and americium. Fukushima released so great the radioactive aerosols in Washington were 100,000 times normal, and that was sustained, still going on. 1,500 atoms of sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs in California air per cubic meter. So you have these different studies showing it's showing up in huge numbers of different isotopes. Yeah, nuclear is not supposed to exist. 40 million becquerels of iodine-131 in a single bed of kelp off of California, because it washes down to the coastline, right? And it's attracted to kelp, attracts it. So last night the video was 2 hours and 6 minutes and 2 seconds. After 12 hours, I get a new number. It was 9 seconds longer. How's everybody doing? Hi, everybody. We got 27 votes. 96% of the people, 96% of the people said Japan should let experts visit the multiple nuclear meltdowns. Hi everybody. Hope everybody's good. Obsolete. Came swinging. Gonna have to do the other screen, I guess. At 44 likes after 15 minutes. 18 hours later, I had 48 likes. And one of the thumbs up had disappeared. So I gained 4 thumbs up in 18 hours after the show was posted. That's some serious censorship right there, mister. Budget, South Korea had a big budget. This is really interesting because they're trying to promote nuclear, so now they got to hide the flaws of nuclear, see? Budget to deal with Fukushima in South Korea, which are crazies because they have helped ostracize North Korea for 70 years. For 70 years, they've had their freedom, and they have imprisoned their neighbor, their kin, really, right? Budget to deal with Fukushima United Nations done it to them, obviously, but South Korea is always posturing, right? Budget to deal with Fukushima radioactive. Listen, calling out wastewater, it should be a crime. It's so evil that they use that word. It's such a deceptive word. So South Korea earmarked 2.6 billion won, $1.8 million for the project, compared to $3 billion the year before. The nuclear safety security mission initially requested $3.8 billion. It was reduced by 30%. They also requested $1.2 billion for radioactive measuring equipment for the releases from Japan. That was cut by half to $600 million, which is $1.41 million Canadian. And so instead, it's 570 million Canadian, and that's only enough to buy a single large spectrometer, basically. So South Korea is not serious about testing because they're going to find huge amount of radiation, see? Because if they haven't been putting it in tanks, it's going straight in the ocean for 11 years. Not to mention the massive radioactive fallout, obviously. The new president, Yoon Suk Yeol administration's drastically cut the budget for responding to Fukushima radioactive water, reveals complacent attitude towards protecting life and the safety of the people. They're not going to check, and they're not going to, if they do, they're not going to find it. They're pro-nuclear. They can't. If you tell the truth, the whole nuclear industry will probably just light them up. Admiral James Stavridis or something, I don't know. He's the former admiral, commander-in-chief of NATO. So if you look up NATO, it's 30 militaries, 30 countries. Not the countries per se. They just say 30 militaries. They were created in response to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was dissolved, and Gorbachev finally is in the ground rotting where he belongs. And NATO should have been disbanded immediately. NATO was a response because they couldn't handle the Soviet Union. Like America couldn't handle it. So he says Ukraine nuclear plant is the animosity equivalent of Chernobyl. Now, he's not acknowledging what Chernobyl is, or, I'm sorry, Fukushima is. He doesn't articulate what Fukushima was, because he couldn't use the comparison. Fukushima lost the common spent fuel pool, which was behind reactor 4 at ground level. Lost all the inventories of 4 reactors for sure, reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. And at the top of the building, like I explained at the beginning, was the spent fuel pools, which is reactor cores that are still splitting the atom, but has to be kept in the water because they'll detonate if you take them out of water. And you're talking about 3,800 assemblies in each pool because you don't have a repository anywhere on the planet, let alone Japan. These reactors were big reactors, and combined they were one of the biggest in the world, and that they had 4 decades of inventory on site. And not anymore because we got the documentation of it. The industry has spent 10 years in a sleeper cell mode, waiting for everybody to get amnesia, and then they came out because they realized the renewable industry is going to curb stomp them. So they're trying to stake out chunks of energy industry in desperation, and they'll cut everybody's throat on the planet to achieve it, folks. So using energy backup, which is diesel reactors, to cool the reactors, because the final power line was cut. There was 3 cut recently, burnt, and the 4th one they claim wasn't cut. They disconnected it to put out the fire, which doesn't make any sense. If it's so bad that it's going to burn the lines, you can't get in there and disconnect it. Does anybody know anything about fires? Has anybody actually ever roasted a hot dog and understands the principle? The basic principle of what a big fire is all about? At IAEA, let's go through it. Europe's largest nuclear plant was relying on emergency backing, which means it's running on generators. It can only run for a couple of hours. I'm sorry, it can run about, I think it's 36 hours altogether. But it can't power external power out from the reactor. It's dependent on an external power. I'll get there. After shelling cut it off from Ukraine grid for the second time in less than a month, so it had 4 separate lines coming in to power the site. It can't run on its own power ever. There is a system there where they can run the pumps temporarily on residual energy that's being created, steam. But it doesn't run it on electricity from the nuclear itself. Ukraine's energy minister warned the world was once again on the brink of a nuclear disaster. Well, he covered up the last, and numbers of them pretty darn effective. After the shutdown, safety experts warned of a slow-moving train wreck could end in a Fukushima-style meltdown. You got to put S on that to equal Fukushima. So you want a deoccupation and demilitarized zone. Some even call for NATO to patrol the skies over the nuclear plants. This is absurd. That's all they were the minute NATO goes in there. NATO shouldn't exist. The last power line connecting the nuclear power disease factory was cut on Monday when Russia shelling started a fire in a nearby forest. When Russians shelling. They weren't there, they don't know. Consequently, the 6th power unit was unloaded and disconnected from the grid and is now powering. Again, read this again. The 6th unit, which is the nuclear power plant, was unloaded, disconnected from the grid, and is now powering the nuclear power plant itself. It can't do that. In extreme conditions, you can run the pump, but not electricity. It's said in the statement on Monday afternoon, this is a complete lie. Oh, I see the IAEA's there. Should have known. The UN Degenerate Scumbags, which has 2 staff members on site, with 9,000 employees in the Russian military. He said the line itself is not damaged, will be reconnected once the fire is extinguished. This is kind of like the Twilight Zone of Twilight Zones. You got any friggin' idea how difficult it is to get up on poles and disconnect the power? Because that's what they're suggesting. In the meantime, the plant's only remaining operational reactor that shouldn't be running. A reactor that's not running is a lot harder to melt down than one that is. The one that is can melt down on a drop of a hat. It's go time. Would generate the power the plant needs for safety and other functions, the IAEA said. I had no concept of what they could possibly be talking about. You got multiple fuel pools there. You got to keep water circulating, and for starters, they can never stop. The reactor can't just shut down. If you just shut it down, it melts down within 50 minutes. So you got generators. Okay, so the generators only are used to shut down the reactor. They're not going to run the reactor for days or a week or something like that. It's not going to feed power out to the grid. It takes a long time to actually shut a reactor off. That's not supposed to be running in a war zone, for God's sakes. The scum degenerate UN confirmed late on Monday night that the backup power line has been disconnected deliberately to extinguish a fire. It was disconnected deliberately. If you're going to, if the power line is in the way of a fire, you're not getting up there and disconnecting it. It's a big deal to disconnect the line. You need winches to pull the line out of the way. Every facet of the story is absurd. It says you continue to receive electricity needs for safety from a sole operating reactor. That's not how it works. It doesn't actually work like that. Something is happening. Telegraph sources, United Kingdom, inside the nuclear plant disease factory described a chaotic scramble to restore connections. Chaotic scramble to restore connections. Said it was coming very close to switching to emergency diesel generators. If it loses external power, that's what it's supposed to do. So they got damaged. I suspect in the next couple of days we're going to hear about a big release, because that makes no sense. And that story came out all over the place. There's nothing factual in the story. The reactors don't work that way. You can't just disconnect these massive power lines. You need special trucks, special equipment. The cool reactors after the last line. Right, so it's using emergency backup to cool the reactors, claiming that these are crazies. It drives me crazy too. It can only work, now they claim it can only work off its own resources for 2 hours. Well, that's the cooling function. That's steam driven. That's not electricity driven. That's an emergency system, right? A redundant, built into the system to help cool it down, but is limited in capacity. It's not sustainable. If the fire is not put out and the line isn't restored, the diesel generator will kick in. The diesel generator is supposed to kick in. So it's not kicked in. But that can only work for 72 hours. We got 30 to 40 minutes left at best. And so there's no updates on what. So it sounds like they had an event. And apparently the IAEA has left the site, which gives us more credence that they had an event there. The diesel generators were briefly engaged during the last shutdown in August and have not been used by Monday evening. How come? That's what's supposed to happen. They're supposed to click on. But typically, these things needed external power. That was one of those spare lines. Severing power lines is dangerous because nuclear power stations relies on external power for cooling. They can't power themselves. So there's so many contradictions in the story. I want to punch whoever wrote it in the fucking face. And sorry, I got no idea where that just came from. Reactors can provide power for their own cooling, but have to be switched to a dangerously low power output if they cannot transmit electricity to the grid. Yeah, they can't run without pumping electricity. A disconnection lasting more than a few hours means resorting to emergency, which is supposed to happen immediately, not wait for desperation for the final minute and then fire up the generators. Can't get anybody climb the pole because it's on fire. Cowards. The world of nuclear is... It's like a mental institution, and everybody in it should be in a rubber room on a drip. And I'm not kidding. It's not. We've been covering this for years and years and years, and it just seems like forever. Super Typhoon could slam straight into a nuclear power plant. Apparently it killed quite a few people. It's already gone through, and we'll never know what happened. They're never going to tell you. This is so Korea on top of that, right? You're never going to find out what really happened. It was coming ashore at around 155, according to them, right? But you got to put gust into every number. The industry is disgusting, isn't it? It's the most powerful storm in South Korea's history. Due to collide with a nuclear disease factory of a Category 5 storm, which means it could be hitting 200 mile per hour winds when it came ashore. But the industry is Looney Tune and kooky and belligerent. It's a belligerent industry, the people in it are extremely belligerent, and they have nothing but contempt for all humans and all species. It's not an accident. TEPCO shows digging up tunnel. And then you got to put the word treated in the friggin' headline. You can't treat radioactive water. The filter becomes so lethal you can never change it again. All the water going through it is more radioactive when it comes out than when it went in after a few hours, right? It can't be done, or they'd be doing it everywhere. The industry is disgusting. I don't understand why the nuclear industry is so disgusting and despicable. Why the people that work for it are so disconnected from any kind of reality. Why they're so self-centered. That's the best way to describe some of the nuclear industry, and if you meet them, you'll see it yourself, is greedy and self-centered and egotistic and psychopathic. So far, they dug around, and these people they roll out in the media, he's like a real-life cartoon, isn't he? Look at him. Makes progress on treated water tunnel. That's their treated water tunnel, folks. These are batshit lunatics. You know how big the tunnel is currently? How long it is? It's 80 meters. 80 meters. We counted the tanks. There's 750, not 1,000. They gained approval from the non-regulatory authorities. 16 meters underground. It's off of reactor 5 and 6, which is really interesting. I knew they weren't going to build it up where the ongoing multiple meltdowns are to. And so far it's 80 meters long. That's a hole in the ground, but it's not a tunnel. Reactors, the plant suffered. You got to go find the word nuclear whenever you're talking about meltdowns, because they won't put those words together, eh? Concerned about possible reputation damage. Tritium, tritium, tritium. This is ludicrous. And then utilizing UN's little puppet, the World Health Organization. They turned out to be despicable creatures, did they ever? I just wanted to touch on this subject again. They're not going to do this. They're talking about encasing the whole reactors in a containment, filling it up with water. It could be done, but they're not capable of doing it. The nuclear industry is can't do jack shit. They got to find people worldwide that can do things and then bring them on board because they can't do it. So they're thinking about reactor 3 first. But there's reactor 3. Like again, right? All of this could be solved pretty easy if it was legal to kick the shit out of these people. They wouldn't be doing what they're doing, see? If you're a public lawyer, it should be legal for everybody to seize you in the next week to kick the shit out of you. It should be mandatory worldwide for everybody to seize you to kick the shit out of them. Then we won't do that, see? You get it? They're going to put a containment around the building where the fuel pools and the reactor cores don't even exist. And they're going to magically get the reactor cores out of the building that doesn't even exist in it. What a coward industry nuclear turned out to be. So they go to university and they're going to ask you, if you want to join the nuclear industry, they're going to ask you, are you a coward? And you're going to say, yeah, oh, hell yeah. They're like, okay, you can be a nuclear scientist. There's a lot of laws you got to learn. It takes 4 or 5 years. And we'll give you a degree, get you a job. You got to tell everybody it's like a banana and a potato chip and walking in the sunshine. You're going to make lots of money. You just got to lie to your parents and kids and friends and families for the rest of your life and yourself. Japan's self-defense force molesting their comrades. So if Japan's self-defense force is going to be raping their own, what do you think they're going to do to the countries that they're occupying? Disgusting maggots. Despicable cowards. China's nuclear outlook is solar and windmills. China's path to better atomic energy runs through solar and wind farms. China is such a piece of shit. Russia risks catastrophe by occupying a nuclear plant in a war zone. The first thing they done was took over Chernobyl in February. And I was like, well, it can't get much worse than that. Little did I know. Laird is the politician. I think no environmentalist on Diablo Canyon deal. I don't know where to start sometimes with this stuff. So they just, like, the Public Utility Commission wanted to close the reactor down because it's decrepit, it's bombarded with neutrons, it's fragile, it's brittle, and they're on multiple fault lines. EDF has rejected Boris Johnson. I was so happy when I seen that, which is because that's what I've been saying all along. Half France's fleet is shut off. Corrosion. You're talking just to fix one of the corrosion issues they got is several years' work. To fix dozens of them is going to take you a decade. They're already past their lifespan on top of that. Boris Johnson threw a measly 700 million pounds to the 20 billion. And so their original budget is 20 billion. That means they're going to need double or triple it to actually finish it. EDF's last one they finished took them 17 years after the 5 years of planning and site prep, which was over $500 million. It's 4 times over budget and 17 years down the road. 12 years behind schedule. That's not too bad, is it? It's the French, Dana. Gas was punished as the war in Ukraine triggered astronomical prices. No, NATO and UN countries put an embargo against Russia's commodities, which caused inflation in 195 countries. They've done it to you on purpose. They can afford all of it. They're not worried about it. They got lots of money. It was designed, the pandemic's already got most small companies destroyed. And It's wrecked the impoverished worldwide, and they want to keep that going, see? They are evil. There's not almost or maybe, or perhaps, they're actually evil. I done a video on Sunday, the World Economic Forum. I included for the first part. Vladimir Putin, Angela Merkel, Justin Trudeau, Macron, and many, many current, former, and past leaders were young global leaders at the World Economic Forums. Over half the Canadian Parliament has went there. Such evil. Such scumbags. It's all about them making their dollars. That's why they done it to us. Ukraine, they'll kill everybody in your country so they can have a few $100,000 in a suitcase somewhere. Ukraine seeks corridor to evacuate civilians near, we were talking about this many times the last couple of weeks, is if you have a radiological release in a nuclear war zone, how do you evacuate people? You're not supposed to be there. The reactors are not supposed to be running. They're captured. I get that, Dana. But they were supposed to shut them off when the war started, so this couldn't happen. Emergency systems activated at Ukraine nuclear power plant as fighting damages power lines. Nuclear power key for Japan's energy security. I wouldn't buy a pair of shoes off that guy. UK nuke plant told to make safety improvements. Private land. Disease factory straight ahead. And EDF owns that too. How pathetic is United Kingdom's nuclear industry, really? EDF owns all the nuclear installations. United Kingdom nuclear academics are pathetic. They're actually pathetic. That's incredible pathetic that you got, particularly a country like France, got to do all the men's work. Was served with an improvement notice by the Office for Non-Regulatory. Like calling these nuclear regulatory agencies is an insult. It's a 100% insult. It's an insult. Oh man, I'm just not going to go there because it'll piss me off. Nuclear fusion is only a clean source of energy. So the Holy Grail, I got to tell this story because you can't tell this story enough, right? Nuclear fusion had the Holy Grail last year where they heat the element has to come up to 150 million degrees. So imagine what your electric bill looks like when you got to jam it up to 150. It's like 200,000 homes at the one time with electricity. And so they claimed that they had a breakthrough last year. We covered it, of course. We cover almost all these stories on fusion because it's fun, right? It's fusion. You get to make fun of them. And they're like nerds that don't do nothing their whole life because their parents were degenerates and got them the job, right? The inbreeds is what I like to call them. And so last year they had net gain of electricity. And so the interviewer said, well, how much was it? Extra. He said, well, how much was what? He said, well, the extra electricity you produced. Oh, he said, it was equal to enough electricity to power a 9-volt battery. These little tiny rectangular batteries. So wait a second. You used the same amount of electricity as 200,000 homes, and you were able to extract that and say there was enough energy left over to power a 9-volt battery type light. Good God, man, are you crazy? This year was a little bit more sophisticated. They said, because they boil water to make electricity. So they jacked it up, their fusion, inter or whatever, and it was 150 million degree temperatures. Now, I don't know about you, but you can boil a lot of water with 150 million degree Fahrenheit temperature, okay? And that's the point. That's what they're talking about. They said he produced enough extra electricity to boil 60 liters of water, 60 jugs of water, 60 kettles of water. Well, first off, I think it's pretty safe to say that 150 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures is going to boil a swimming pool pretty quick. And how do you extrapolate 60 kettles of water out of that? Oh, that's right, you don't. But that's their holy grail, and they wanted billions of dollars or more funding each time. Is the only clean source of energy. Listen, you batshit lunatic crackpot. You bizarre Augusta Cotira. You know why the world got no future? Because people like you exist and probably had kids. Nuclear scientists shouldn't be allowed to have kids, folks. The problem is they're going to get the same job, right? And their parents are so evil. Their parents were so evil. There's no end to the cycle of abuse against us and 8 million species. So Liz Truss in the United Kingdom is the 3rd female prime minister. She's nutting. The Queen put her in that job, right? Queen put her there, told her to get her cabinet. She fired Boris, the newly elected leader, Conservative Party, become prime minister, and form a new government. She invited the newly elected leader, Conservative Party, to become prime minister. She gave her the sanctions first. Same as Boris, same as the rest of them. The United Kingdom maintained a continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent since 1969. After they blew the shit out of Christmas Island and all the victims, and went over to Australia, waited for the wind to blow across Australia and detonated nuclear bombs and 700 dirty bombs of plutonium and uranium-235. But to bring Tony Blair in and show his picture without warning, without some kind of warning, that warning picture below has depictions of Tony Blair. There should be a warning. You should have to click on it to open up the picture. It's absolutely not fair. It's not fair to show us pictures of Tony Blair with no warning. That's some sick-ass shit, man. Stupid, idiotic, moron nuclear submarines. You can't use them. They got 19 down there in UK that they can't decommission because you never built a way to decommission them. There's just be one. You got children all over the country starving to death, can't get medical care, and you're blowing everything on this idiot machine that you can't even use. You can't use it. You can't use the nuclear weapon. If a country has nuclear weapons, they're going to fire back. And then nobody can ever cash a check anymore. It's stupid. All that money wasted on something you can't use. The definition of stupid is the nuclear industry, man. Environmental groups. And they name beyond nuclear. I'm not going to go down that road tonight. We do it all the time, right? These are degenerate scumbags. Hence the name of the show, the Nuclear Degenerate Scumbag Show. It's absurd how many times we've called them out over the years to show you that these are unequivocal, just they're degenerate scumbags. Created by Helen Caldicott, nut job, who done hundreds of interviews saying reactor 4 fuel pool was being emptied. The building didn't even exist. How to use CAT scans and hybrid nuclear imaging. How to murder somebody. Make sure you put the lead belt on them so they get an extra massive dose. Because these things calibrate themselves. When you put the belt on you, the lead belts, it has to figure out how to shoot through that to get the x-ray. And it will. And you're going to get a life-changing dose each time. Or your children, or your friends, or your family. Yeah, U.S. military flies 2 nuclear-capable B-52 Stratofortresses over the Middle East. What would happen if the Middle East done that to America, I wonder? Alongside Allied aircraft from United Kingdom, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. And when he went through Israel, Israel fighter jets went up and flew with him through the territory. Stupid idiots. Can you imagine that's your job, is to get up and fly around in these stupid machines? Can you imagine how evil your family's got to be for you to get that job? Because that's how that actually works. This bomber task force, the suicide bomber task force. How many suicide bombers does it take to equal one of those jets, I wonder? How many suicide bombers from Palestine does it take to equal one of those Israeli jets? Net Zero was a paper done by Miles Allen. He was nobody then, he's a nobody now, but that was gobbled up by UN and now is used to bludgeon everybody worldwide. I can't go there tonight. Nuclear waste site in the spotlight in Australia. The nuclear waste site is a deep geological repository. They want to put it at Kimba. And Kimba is all prime farmland. This is where nuclear dumps and nuclear power plants seem to all end up in prime farmland. The natives were left out of the debate. We covered this in 2014, 2016 when you originally done it. There was a big kerfuffle for several weeks, right? It was a Royal Commission, I think it was, wasn't it? We covered it extensively. And they divided this little community of Gimba, and they need a deep geological repository for medical waste from hospitals. So you get so radioactive that your excrement needs to go into a deep geological repository, and somehow that's going to make you better. It's the kookiest thing imaginable, but millions a year die doing it. Government officials didn't talk to the people, the Barngarla natives, which is their land, for the studies or anything else. deep geological repository for stuff from a hospital, then that's deadly to anybody that was infected with it. It's such an evil industry. There's zero redeeming qualities in this industry. So the idle air control valve still never showed up. And the weather switched today, so it didn't really matter. But we got mass die-offs. I'm desperate to get out. There's nothing I could do about it. Hang on, I'll show you. Because normally you get a whole... I'll explain to you in a second. Hang on. I made screen captures, but I didn't. It was supposed to show up last Monday, right? It was supposed to show up last Monday. It didn't. There was no updates. Just a carrier picked up the package on the 21st. I got no idea what that is. Is that the right one? Yeah, that's the idle air control package. So still not here. It'll probably show up tomorrow, I guess. I don't know. It should have been here Monday. They said it'd be there Friday. It didn't show up Friday. Yesterday was a holiday, so you figured it'd show up today, right? The mail didn't get sorted till 4:30 or something today. Still wasn't there. You have to wonder, are they screwing me over, right? On purpose? They know we need to get out there and do research. I guess that's it for tonight, I suppose. So I don't care if it shows up tomorrow. I'm not going to get my hopes up again. But the weather's shit tomorrow, so it don't matter. And then we went from 30, 33 degree temperatures to 18, 15, and 20, right? And tomorrow's supposed to be a miserable day. I would still go out on the ocean if it shows up tomorrow, but once I head out on the ocean, I'll be gone for a while. So I might as well take my time anyway. We got to consider booting across the province for 900 kilometers and back on the trails looking for spiders before fall gets established. So I don't know how that's going to play out. Let's close the poll. Should Japan let independent experts visit the nuclear wasteland of Fukushima site after 11 years of secrecy? Got an overwhelming 97% says yeah. They should let someone independently go in and verify the lies and propaganda and deceits and deception and misrepresentation. Let's do a call out, shout out to everybody for it. I give it up for tonight anyway. I don't know if it matters. Give me thumbs up anymore. They're going to censor me, eh? Create a playlist. Maybe we can defeat them that way. They're not censoring the thumbs up because they're bored. Because it's people are starting to share it, and they're gonna stop it. No, it'll show up. It'll probably show up tomorrow. It drives me, it's insane that something like that is still not here. And that's the problem. We've had this issue with everything we ordered online that we needed. It took way longer than it was supposed to. Dana Nasana, hi Dana. Obsolete Thinker. Colette, yes, hi Colette. It's good to see you. Remember, if you're doing the DCA, it's 2 weeks on, 1 week off, right? And the max typically is 25 milligrams per kilogram. For me, it's about almost 2 grams a day. But you can take a week off because you got lots left residue in your body, and let your body just use up what's stuck in your body. 5 days, 7 days, something like that, and then start again. Richard, good night, everybody. A little off my game tonight, I notice. Just frustrated that the boat is not in the water. We got mass die-offs happening. It's okay, we're getting there. James Luce donated another $60 last night, and we thank James for that and highly appreciate it. It's a big deal. We're gathering up now for the expedition, right? So every time a little bit comes in now, it's amazing because it's been such a difficult year, and this will help make, because these expeditions there's nothing cheap about it. And we're fueled up, truck is fueled up, boat's fueled up, batteries are charged up. I updated the GPS yesterday before we done the show. Dale P. I forgot to call out names because I'm yakking. Then just shut up, don't call out. Another Gmail. And James Lucid, who I already called out, but hi James. Stephen Young, hi Stephen. John Curtis, Peace Swear. Because you actually got to concentrate to do a shout out. Because if you'll miss people if you don't, right? I don't like it. Fourth, who left a comment on the beginning, which usually disappears if you put it there too soon. It'll disappear after 3 or 4 hours pre-show when you leave a comment, typically. It'll stay on the inside where I'm to, because I keep the same window, right? I don't refresh it. You're welcome, Colette. Glad to help. Ken Zoe, thank you. Let me see if I missed anybody. Man, I always seem to miss 1 or 2 people for some reason. Swanee D will probably show up tomorrow. Who else can I think of? I already said Stephen Young. Probably forgetting somebody else. Yeah, I would go for the powder typically because it's pure DCA. And the powder is already diluted a little bit. That's just me. Pills are fun because you just take a pill. You don't have to measure it yourself, right? You mix it with water, and a little bit of water is the best way because your body absorbs water really quick. Okay, looks good. Looks like I shouted it out to everybody that I can find. I'll read all the comments later anyway. Oh my God, it's Tuesday already? Wow. And so bad weather tomorrow, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to worry about it. I hope it shows up. I'll get it installed and get some videos for everybody. I'll show you a side-by-side of all three of them. Okay, folks. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. It's a great day to be alive. Except for the nuclear industry, of course. Have a great night, folks. Take care.